I've said it 1,000 times before. I'll say it 1,000 times again. Agent-based versus equation-based. Lead with problem solving, people, process, then technology, not equation-based, which is technology, process, and people. If you go one versus the other, if you do agent-based, you will always succeed, regardless of the technology. So that's the
Yeah.
one takeaway I would expect people to. And of course, don't abdicate your responsibility in your own success.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of the Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for Companies Running SAP. Today, we have the great pleasure of John Hansen joining us. And John has a really cool career. He started, founded, and sold an e-procurement company back before ProcureTech was cool. And from that, translated that into a career as an independent analyst, and now a connector, a matchmaker, if you will, for people looking for advice and solutions for procurement. So, John, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'll tell you something, it's great to be here. Exciting to go back and actually talk with someone who understands. You're not walking into a boardroom, nothing against young people. You're not walking into a boardroom where you say, "I remember CPM or DOS or things like that," and they go, "What? What's that?" It's nice to be able to have somebody actually know what you're talking about. You don't feel quite so fossilized.
A little bit of white hair goes a long way. So, John, we connected and got introduced over this idea that you shared around this Mendocino project. And
Yes.
it really caught my interest. There's something fascinating about this idea. What was the Mendocino project?
At the highest level, and it ultimately was named Duet on a watered down version, but basically, Microsoft was going to purchase by SAP. And the concept was we have our suite of Office, Excel, all of these things, email, where users are already embracing it. It's still the top Office suite around. And so if we did that and integrated it with SAP, imagine we would get rid of that maverick spend, or we get rid of that change management because they're already using our tools. That was the initial concept at the highest level. And then never really came about. Certainly, I think again it became Duet, and they watered it down. But ultimately, back then, and I think this is the key because we still have that issue now. We call it orchestration, user experience, user interface. Back then, I called it Metaprise and other things. But the reality is, the problems that hindered us back then with integration, service-oriented architecture, all of these other things have new names now, but it's still the same problem. And, we talked about this in the green room, Sean, is that if you look back, ERP initiatives failed at a rate of 80% or more. Some say higher, some say lower, but within that range. Then you go to SaaS, the great buy the drink. And that's failed. 2019, the Deloitte CPO survey globally said that 70+% of people executives weren't happy with the results of their digital transformation initiative. Which, by the way, I'll digress and say that I was always saying, well, we're going to ask if somebody's digital ready, because I think that's an important point to make with these failures. It's not one-sided. The technology is phenomenal now. It's steady. I mean, it's not like my days of programming DBase 2 and bugs here and, some would go wrong somewhere else. But I think the inherent problem is we still haven't addressed what integration means. We lead with technology versus leading with problem solving. And so what we're seeing now, AI, Gartner's recent report was that 80% of all AI initiatives are failing. So I'm thinking to myself, when are we going to learn and not repeat this cycle? And I think the idea is the recognition back then with the Mendocino project. I think the recognition, we have to now take it to the next stage. And I don't know why it's taken this long. But, everybody keeps going at it with let's throw tech at it. I don't care how good tech is. Tech will not facilitate orchestration or integration before problem solving. You've got to have that problem solving. So that's where recognize. So to sum it up, the Mendocino project was a recognition of a problem. Where we are today is doing the same things we've been doing the last couple of decades, which is saying, here's some software, it's going to work, it'll make it fast, you can do all these things. It doesn't work that way. The technology is great, but the practitioner side has to take some of the responsibility of not looking for that silver bullet.
Well, I think that silver bullet is the same thing that we keep seeing in so many facets of life. And we, for several years, actually did several full ERP implementations. We don't really do that anymore. We're more focused on building our software. But one of the things that we actually had as a giant red full page stop sign in any of our responses was, stop. This is your project. And you may not abdicate this to anybody else. This is
Yes.
your business. This is your project. You need to run it. You will own this when it comes out. And it's the same thing for something in the procurement technology space. It's the same thing. You cannot abdicate this to a piece of software. You cannot simply take a pill and make it better.
Well,
You must take accountability for the
Yes.
fitness and habits and diet that you bring as a business leader to your department, to your business. And I know that here, just take this SaaS pill, it will make it better, is
Yes.
about as true as the idea that Ozempic has no side effects.
Well, absolutely. You know what? That's the perfect example, the Ozempic example. You know, what's interesting, Sean, is that if you think about it, like we all know, well, you got to go to bed, get at least 8 hours sleep a night. You got to exercise and eat right. How many salespeople are going in selling solutions now saying, well, wait, let's stop here. We have to see if we're right for each other, if we can work together in that dynamic, right? We have to look at all of those other aspects of it. How many salespeople walked away from the deal they know wasn't going to work? And I asked this question of the service providers that I interview and screening for my 5 to 10 map. And I'd say, you know, what if you go in a situation where you've got silver bullet mindset and we're going to pay you this money? How many would walk away from a sale? And unfortunately, very few would. They'll
Not
say,
enough.
okay, we'll win it first and we'll worry about making it work later. So it's selling rainbows. And everybody, you know, and somebody's got to stop and say, no, no, no. Now you got to find the right client. Choose the right client as much as the right client has to choose the right provider. And that's the matchmaking.
Yep.
Because I interview practitioner clients as much as I do provider clients. And if I look at a practitioner client and say, this person doesn't do anything, I mean, they're just, come on, put it in, let's advocate. And you use that word advocate, John, and I like that because I've used it so often. Let's just abdicate responsibility. You know, turn over the steering wheel to the solution provider. We can't be blamed. And I think you use that term that I'm familiar with as well in the green room of no one ever got fired for buying IBM. And it's like that mindset is, hey, as long as I get somebody big, and I'll digress a little bit there. In Canada, they had the Way Forward initiative in early 2000, 2004 or 5. And I chaired a post-mortem, let's call it a post-mortem discussion with key people from the government. And it was like, I remember I saying earlier on, they're going to spend all this money. And one of the most senior people at Treasury, I said, look, I don't know, maybe it's the new math, but I just don't see how this aligns with this. And what was surprising, he put in an email to me. He said, you know, you may be right, but we followed the right procedure, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and that's ultimately what matters. And I thought to myself,
Bullshit.
well, I mean, ultimately it matters. You followed procedures, you followed orders. What are you talking about? But that breakdown is that, you know, for somebody to take advantage of you, you have to allow them to take advantage of you. So I think you know, this is not one-sided providers doing bad. This is a market of where the objectives and the goals aren't properly aligned, and everyone's willing to drink the Kool-Aid, and then they wonder what went wrong. Does that sound
I know
over
that.
the top to you?
No, it actually sounds beautifully simple because I know that the second stage in our sales process, after we've gotten a chance to get to know somebody, has in big letters at the top, you do not prescribe a solution until you get to the next stage, because doing so is called malpractice.
Yes.
And this idea that the fit with, are they able to go make decisions? Are they ready to do something and make a change happen? Or are they looking to pawn off something and follow a process? Because following a process is a quick recipe to an outcome that the process may or may not have been designed for. And
Yep.
that person steering the ship on whatever initiative that somebody's looking to buy technology for, if they're thinking about it, buy technology for, you've already started wrong. Because
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
people that need a solution and then a problem that's defined around a process, and then some technology to help automate the way through it. And a friend recently posted something on LinkedIn about how people get too excited about crypto and Web3 and whatnot, and they don't spend enough time on the fundamentals. And so
yeah.
I think the other thing I'm hearing you emphasize, John, is that the fundamentals are so important.
Well,
The fundamentals are actually,
incredibly important. Like when with the D&D, for example, work that I did, I was brought in by the company MCI WorldCom, who's managing the account. They were having a horrible time with next day deliveries at around 51%, where it called for 90% or better. And so they said, okay, we got to automate procurement. And I said, no, let's do this first. How does procurement work now? Oh, by the way, and this is agent-based modeling. Let me see what service department, how they handle it, like some of their issues. And I looked at service, and they had an agenda where they said they're rewarded for the number of calls they can complete in a day. And there was a loose policy saying that if you finish a call, order the part that you need right then. Well, what they would do is saying, look, I'm graded on how many calls I make. They would sandbag all the orders until 3 or 4 o'clock and then dump it on procurement or the purchasing, the buyer team. And they were dealing, because they're MRO products, the analysis of the market is that they were dynamic flux. The products that you could pay $1,000 or you pay $100 for in the morning would be $1,000 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because there was no MSRP. These were MRO spare parts and direct materials. So we said, so what are we automating then? If you're not getting the orders still until 3 or 4 o'clock, will it help you get bad buys faster? And you can have a scorecard that maybe is clear, but what we're not automating. There's nothing to automate there. We have to look and say, what is their likelihood of changing
are
their
you
behavior?
automating the right thing?
Yes, well, that's the whole point. And then
Automating orders at 3 p.m. is just going to cost more.
and then we looked at the providers, and most of the solutions, because of the parts, were coming south of the border. Now, here's the problem. Most of the source for these providers weren't big, sophisticated companies, so they didn't know anything about clearance. So we looked and said, okay, we got UPS in, and we said, okay, let's create this platform. Now the technology starts coming, but you have to make it work manually first. Let's create a platform where we choose right suppliers. And then what we do is once we have selected the right supplier, we will send out a purchase order with pre-filled in waybill information and simultaneously send out a dispatch to UPS, who will go and pick it up automatically. So the supplier didn't have to worry about anything. He just had to worry about packaging the item up right. And so that's how
Get it
we
ready
went.
for me.
What's that?
Just get it ready for me.
Yeah,
It's
just get it
so
ready.
easy.
And it was like 53%, 51% next day delivery on the manual process first. Within 3 months, it got to 97% next day delivery. We said, now that's something we want to automate. You see,
Yeah.
that's what you automate. And that's where we took down the overall combined buying group that was on the MCI WorldCom side. And within 18 months, went down from 23 to 3 buyers, simply because you didn't have to have all this follow-up. You didn't have to do all these things. It was agent-based. But we went in there with a solution saying, okay, we automate this without understanding how service works. And I'm oversimplifying this, but it is actually very simple.
It's so true.
Agent-based model, if you understand how external agents work and what they do and their structure, how the customs work, how suppliers work. Now all of a sudden, I think that's called orchestration. I don't know. Have you ever heard that term,
It is
orchestration?
now, yeah,
Yeah.
orchestration. It's now cool.
Oh, yeah. We
It's
call it a
delightful for
metacross.
me because we were doing intake and orchestration in 2015 before it was even called that. And it's delightful to see, what the software that we've been deploying since then now called intake and orchestration. Super fun. And how far it's come since then, like our own software and the market and everybody else. But that idea of agent-based, persona-based, go make it so easy you don't need training.
Right.
Just like my favorite story of the public sector organization with 500 unionized staff that needed to start buying electronically, and they could do that with no training because it was so easy to help them do it right through the policy and the process and the whole orchestration of it. I love the idea that there is now a category for a solution like this. And as much as we won't be paying Gartner 6 figures to write about us, I do appreciate that it is now something that people are asking for. And
Yes.
it's at least a decade overdue for this to be something that people need. And this idea that it's already out there, it's already possible, and others have already done it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Well,
And
look at the
some
work you
people have
did.
even done it directly on SAP ERP like ours.
Exactly. Look at the work you did, 2015. My work was in the late 90s, early 2000. What works, regardless of the technology. And, I think I mentioned this to you. 10 to 15 years from now, we're going to look back at this technology with the same dismissive attitude. We look at floppy drives, CPM, and DOS. And for you who may not know what that is, those were the operating systems. And those glory days when everyone said, we'll never need more than 10 megabytes hard drives. The reality is technology is always going to change and improve. Problem solving is the key, and then matchmaking between the right provider and the right practitioner, because the practitioner has a role to play here. And I think you mentioned that, and I think it's very important. You can't abdicate the responsibility, but so many companies right now will not walk away from a deal that they know will not work. And just talking with the industry in general, most of the people close business they know will never work.
It's unfortunate. And unfortunately, folks like you and I can go help make that happen less often.
Yes.
John, this has been an absolute delight to connect and share. I hope this serves a whole host of folks in the community. I'm looking forward to doing this again soon. And I know we're just about out of time. So, John, if you have a last thought that you wanted to leave people with that would serve people in that procurement, supply chain, IT world, or for companies that run SAP, what would you invite them to consider?
I've said it 1,000 times before. I'll say it 1,000 times again. Agent-based versus equation-based. Lead with problem solving, people, process, then technology, not equation-based, which is technology, process, and people. If you go one versus the other, if you do agent-based, you will always succeed, regardless of the technology. So that's the one takeaway I would expect people to. And of course, don't abdicate your responsibility in your own success.
It is all about the people taking accountability and owning what they do and owning the outcome.
Absolutely.
John, thank you. Grateful for you joining today, and grateful for all of you that tune in every week, all tens of thousands of you. Thank you. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you again soon for the never-ending climb for a stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP. Thank you.